Hi, I'm Robin Birkin, an ex-corporate marketer turned online business owner. I took everything I knew and created a six-figure life coaching business in the margins between nap times and a 9 to 5, and I'm here to share with you how you can do the same. Tune in as I share the raw and unfiltered truths, big lessons, and practical tips to help you build and grow a sustainable bread-winning business online that is both peaceful and profitable. Here, we dive deep into all things online courses, funnels, audience growth, and so much more. If that sounds like the things you want to learn, then welcome to Signature Online Course Secrets. Let's go. So I don't know about you, but I am low-key obsessed with finding out the behind the scenes of how people run their businesses. I love seeing things like launch debriefs. I used to be part of a membership with quite a well-known business owner who is someone who I love, massively high integrity. And she used to share a monthly behind the scenes in her business. I share a behind the scenes engine room session with the Peace and Profit Mastermind because it is so incredibly valuable in business. If all you are seeing online is people on Instagram who are sharing things like, these are my hashtag tactics, or these are the trending audios, I can tell you right now that you are not going to be getting the best out of your business, because the true secrets to online business, number one, exist behind closed doors. But number two, mostly exist when we're looking at the processes and the way that someone manages their business, rather than the 2-second tactics that every Instagram coach out there is sharing. Business success is not about 2-second tactics, even though I know that that's the sexy thing. That's what gets the likes and the shares on Instagram. I can tell you right now, that's not where the gold lies. And so today on this podcast, I am diving deep into the kinds of things that will move the needle for you in business, i.e., who is on my team and what do they do. Now, if you would like to know exactly what I do on a day-to-day basis, what calls do I have in the mastermind? Like, what do I do on a day-to-day basis? What time do I wake up? What time do I start work every day? If you want to know all of those details, I have a free guide. It is epic. So many people have come back to me and told me that it's been a game changer. They've had a look at, where they're investing their time in their businesses and finally being able to find time to work out, prioritize their health, etc. Totally free. Check out the show notes below. Now, I also want to, before we get started, speak to the Peace and Profit Mastermind. As you know, this is my signature program, and this is where I pour so much of my energy into. And it's all designed to help women in business working part-time hours who want to scale to that sweet six-figure, multi-six figures in revenue with a really lean team and high profit margins. It's exactly the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about in this podcast episode. But if you think you might want to work with me or even just know more about what that looks like, please can I encourage you to join the priority waitlist for the mastermind. You can see the link below again in the show notes. You will get the best possible rate as well as the best possible bonuses for the mastermind when you join that waitlist. We'll be opening applications up in early November for a 2025 start. To give you an idea of the deadlines, if you are now planning your 2025, you want to be on that priority waitlist so that you can find out the details. Per usual, we only have a handful of spots, and the waitlist continues to grow every single day for the mastermind. So how many spots we take to the public is unknown. But also, if you're on the priority VIP waitlist, that's where you'll receive the best possible rate and bonuses to join us in the mastermind. So click on the link below, join us on the waitlist for the mastermind. If it's something that you want to consider, if you want to look at Facebook ads, hiring VAs, scaling your revenue without bloating your product suite, and really have a business that prioritizes both peace and profit, all of the things I'm going to speak to today when I talk all about my virtual assistants, who's on my team, then please make sure you're on the waitlist, because it's a game changer type program that doesn't fit the general rhetoric online of like scale, 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 do more, do more. That's not us. We're about peace and profit. So today on the podcast, like I said, I'm speaking to exactly who is on my team and what do I do? What do they do? And what I do. So, the first kind of team member that I hired in my business, and for full disclosure, the only employee I've ever had in my business is me because I'm registered as a company. I'm an employee of my business. Everyone else in my business is and has been a contractor, and that suits me just fine. That's exactly what I want. I do not want to have any employees in my business. So happy with just having contractors. So the first team member / contractor that I had in the business was a podcast manager. So I always remember Monica reaching out to me in the Instagram DMs and saying that she was a listener, being so lovely in terms of the message that she sent and saying that she came from a background in radio and would love to give me an audit. She pitched me the audit. It wasn't like, I'm going to give you this out of love. And whenever people talk to me about cold DMs, I always think back to Monica because was such a great addition into my business that eventuated from a really great cold DM pitch. So I don't really cold DM people. I do DM people who are warm in my audience, but she cold DM'd me. And, the quality of the DM that she sent was great. She submitted me an audit and then pitched me her monthly services to edit and upload my podcast with show notes. She was the first person I ever hired in my business. And at the time that I had hired her was also a time when I had such limited time to give to my business. And I was also working a part-time job. I had 6 hours per week max to work in my business. And the podcast was so ridiculously sporadic. I would aim to publish an episode once per week. By the time I actually got around to editing the podcast episode, uploading it, writing the show notes, etc., it would be 3 to 4 weeks. So that was what the podcast looked like in those early days. And I could see the potential because I'm savvy with things like search engine optimization. So I knew what type of topics, I knew how to get an audience through to the podcast, but just didn't have the time to execute on that. So when I first hired her, I had precious little time, but had just sort of fired / let go of all of my freelance clients. So my freelance marketing clients were the people who were giving me consistent revenue in my business. I let go of them at the same time as committing to spending hundreds of dollars per month on Monica, who was a podcast manager. And that felt really terrifying to me because that was the first time that I felt like I was committed to earning a decent revenue in my business. So up until that point, my expenses had been fairly minor. It was, I think some software here and there, website technology, etc. And then this was the first time that I was like, oh shit, $500 a month has to be set aside for this person and I have to be able to pay them. So it felt like a giant up level in my business at that time because I was now committed to actually trying and making this revenue. I also knew that the podcast was a massive priority for me and that with regular support, it was something that I could publish once a week and do really consistently, which I knew had to happen if I wanted to be serious in my business. So hired Monica. And along the way, at times, I've had other contractors who have, come onto my team on sort of like retainer basis. So at one time I had Chris, who was a YouTube editor. So he has a video background. He too was amazing, like one of the best video editors ever. YouTube was a priority for me at that time. Again, because I knew search engine optimization, that was something that I focused my energy on for a short time. I actually didn't end up prioritizing YouTube for that long, even though I think YouTube is ninja. And then at one time, at various times, I've also had virtual assistants in the business, but I kept running into this same problem with virtual assistants. I was really stubborn at the start about only hiring virtual assistants from like the US, Australia, Canada regions. One of the reasons for that was I wanted them to have a certain level of independence in the business. So a lot of the time I was hiring people who were in similar industries who I knew were fairly tech savvy to work in the business. Sometimes they were officially VAs. Sometimes it was just something that they wanted to do on the side to sort of supplement their own online business. But I'd inevitably run into this problem that I could only really afford to be paying them for 5 hours per week. So typically, their wages, depending on what currency it was in, it would range from like $30 an hour to $65 per hour. So all I could really dedicate was like 5 hours per week, which is nothing, which is if they work for my business twice a week, that's 2 and a bit hours twice a week. So it's almost nothing. So not only was that not enough to really sustain them financially, it also wasn't enough for them to really be emotionally invested in my business, nor get a significant amount of work done. So it became like a revolving door. If I think back, most of the virtual assistants I had would stay for about 6 months and then bounce. They would go on to other things. They would maybe take on corporate roles, or they would say, I just really want to invest my energy into my own business. And why wouldn't you? I would do that as well. In order for me to really feel like someone was invested emotionally in my business and had the capacity to do the tasks that I eventually wanted to outsource to them, I really felt like I needed someone at that 20 to 40 hours per week. I needed someone who could get to know my business, that I could rely on when things were really busy for me and I needed to say, hey, is that something you can do? So if that was an Australian, Canadian, US type virtual assistant, I'd be looking at, $5,000 per month, which just wasn't possible for me at that time, nor really, I think, the best use of my profit in my business. And I'll talk about profitability later. One time I had a senior virtual assistant called Emma, and I want to say I paid her $40 to $50 an hour. She was a professional virtual assistant, and the quality of work, like she was a gun on Pinterest, and she was also able to work really independently. But again, because I could only invest from a time perspective a few small hours per week, continuing to work with her just wasn't fitting with the type of business that I had. Because as well as profitability, I was only working about 6 hours per week in the business. If you've ever worked in corporate, you know that leading a team means dedicating energy away from doing in the business to leading in the business. So with such a short number of working hours per week, I didn't feel like I had that ability to either lead or deliver to my clients or do content. So I am always quite stubborn on if someone joins my program, I don't want another coach to be the leader in the delivery of that program. So I know a lot of programs will have support coaches. I've had support coaches as well, and I've loved it. I think they've been awesome in allowing me to be consistent in the support that we've provided as a team. But always, I've wanted to be the dominant support in the business. And now to the mastermind, like you get me in the mastermind. And when we look at trends in 2024 and 2025, I think that that's what people want. Like if somebody is paying for your support, if they're resonating with you on social media, they don't want to get into a container and then have somebody else supporting them. So I feel like that can be a giant letdown, especially when we're in high ticket containers like masterminds. People are there for you and for your expertise. So I've always wanted to be the number one person providing support to the people who are in my programs and containers. And in 6 hours per week, it was kind of two things, which it still is two things that I prioritize: supporting clients and creating content that supports non-clients in becoming clients. So then, in order to have significant time invested in leading someone who is being paid a premium rate for long enough hours per week was something that really wasn't feasible for me. More recently, I also kind of ran into the same problem. This year, we had an incredible team member called Kate, and I have such love heart eyes for Kate. And she filled a really, what I think is important role in complementing the team. So Kate was a virtual assistant who was kind of like, I don't know a better word, but like the mother hen slash matron of the group. So she would keep us on track. She would make sure the Asana board was clear. She would do my emails. She would follow up, and she was never afraid to come forward and be like, Robin, you're missing a deadline on this. And so she was really great at organizing everything. But the biggest problem that I had is I only work now still about 16 hours per week in the business. So I only have so much time for delegation, training, workload management, and team management. So I didn't have enough capacity to lead another team member, nor did I have enough workload to actually make it worthwhile. One of the conversations we've been having in the mastermind, just even today, is about making those CEO level decisions. And so one of the CEO level decisions that I made was to scale down our team this year. So that meant taking on more workload personally myself, but created more peace in my business because I didn't have, number one, the pressure of like payroll of this team member, but also mostly I didn't have the like pressure of always ensuring that there was enough workload for another person. And when we look at the big bro marketers or the conversation that goes online is, everyone's like, you should be working on your business, not in your business. You need to hire a team, you need to scale, you need to do all these things. That's really great for some people in business, but I prioritize not only profit in the business, but also peace. And leading a team for me is possibly one of the least enjoyable tasks in business. In corporate days, I think this is where I'm scarred, is I used to have a team of about 20 people and literally felt like all day, all I did was support them. I'd be putting out fires. There would be, they'd speak to another department and have a really bad experience. So then I would have to go back. I'd have to fix that. I'd have to train them, hire them. And every time you hire a new team member, there's that period where you kind of have to drop everything and onboard them in a really good way if you want to be a really good boss. And, I think it's a big misconception that you should enjoy every waking moment of your business. You won't. And especially if you're a CEO, you will not enjoy all of the tasks you do in your business. So if you're avoiding tasks like looking at your numbers and your books, or if you're avoiding tasks like debriefing your launches to figure out what didn't work, they're not always enjoyable tasks, but they're necessary tasks. You should enjoy around 70% of the day-to-day in your business, and the other 30% is going to be things that you don't want to do but do nonetheless because you're a CEO in the business. But the other misconception is this working like on the business versus in the business. One of the joys I have in life is actually doing a lot of things in the business. One of the reasons why I have an online business is because I love tinkering on websites. I love creating sales pages and web pages and websites. And I know so many of you are going to listen to that and be like, what a nerd, what a freak. I really do love it though. And so why would I give up all of the things that I really, really enjoy in my business for the sake of scaling? Because the other consideration is that every time you hire a new person, that reduces the profit in your business unless their role is a profit generating role. And this is the other misconception, is that every role in your business should be profit generating. And I disagree. If the goal of your business is to scale and have this giant business with an office building, massive brand awareness. And then eventually the goal is to sell that business for a couple of $1 million and bounce. Totally different. You are going to reinvest as much profit in your business into scaling, growing, hiring team, and essentially like taking yourself out of the business so that you can eventually sell it. And then, you're going to spend long hours in startup. You're going to always be looking at how you can offload tasks in your business. The type of business or the business model that I have is radically different. The business model I have does not involve long hours because that's not available to me. Even if that's what I wanted, which isn't what I want, not available to me. 16 hours is what I have. And what I want is to make better than corporate wages with all the flexibility of online business, whilst also only working 16 hours per week. So what that looks like is being very intentional with my peace and my profit. Not all staff members are profit generating. So if, the vernacular is that every staff member should create 2 to 3 times a return on investment in terms of profit, how do you always quantify that? If that's a human resources manager, how do you quantify that? If that's a bookkeeper or an admin role or a customer service role, how do you quantify that? And then when we look, it's so easy if it's a DM call setter or it's someone who's going to convert for you on calls. I'd argue it's not that easy for an admin role. So when I'm hiring, this is something that I'm considering, is that the profit in my business is where I start to generate my take-home pay. So where is the line between peace and where is the line between profit and the sweet 6 goals that I have in my business? So being really intentional on that, looking at what I enjoy in my business, has me wanting the leanest team possible. So that's sort of where I sit, is that I don't want a big team. I actually want a really, really lean team. And that looks like 1 part-time to full-time VA, and that's about it. So therefore, right now in my business, I have 1 part-time VA. So in 2022, I shut down the life coaching business that I had and I stopped the podcast. Well, actually in 2023 was the last time we sort of ran the very last launch and fully closed the doors. But 2022 was when I stopped the podcast. I got to August 2022. I thought I had recorded all of my podcast episodes for August 2022. And I had gone to a business retreat, recorded them while I was on retreat, batch recorded all of these podcast episodes, got back, went to hand them over to Monica, who was the podcast manager. And this was a time when I was feeling so deeply unaligned with that business. It felt uncomfortable and not easy. It wasn't because I felt bored with the business. It was the business really wasn't aligned with what I wanted to do. And I felt like I kind of limped to the finish line with that business. Gave her all of the podcast episodes and all of the files were corrupted. And she was like, sorry, you're going to need to re-record all of them. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So that was when I had to say, really sadly, farewell to Monica as my podcast manager, because I was no longer producing a podcast. I did not have it in me to produce like a single other podcast episode for my life coaching business. I still had my membership for infertility, and all the while was sort of increasingly feeling unaligned with the business, but had these consistent tasks that needed to be done. So through the mastermind that I was in at the time, I was introduced to a lady called Michelle from Outsourcing Crew. And that's when I think it was, like late 2022 or mid 2022, started working with my first ever virtual assistant from the Philippines, Febby. There's one question I've been asked more than anything else, and it's this. Robin, how do you get so much done in such a short period of time? Because I've never had the luxury of being able to work in my business and hustle those 40 to 60 hour weeks. It's all been between nap times, a 9 to 5 or the school run. And from my second year in business and ever since, we've had 6-figure plus years. So this is it. I've put together for you my entire weekly work schedule, my to-do list, and everything I do in my business to help give you the tips, insights, and strategies to help you thrive as a business owner in part-time hours. It's called 16-Hour CEO, and it's a value-packed PDF that takes you behind the scenes in my business. Want a copy? It is totally free, and it's at launcheasylife.com/CEO. That's launcheasylife.com/CEO. All right, let's dive back into the episode. I had strongly resisted in the past hiring a virtual assistant from the Philippines. So as I explained before, one of the reasons for that was I wanted someone independent and had the belief that if I hired someone from the Philippines, I would need to handhold them every second of the day. But also, I feel like there's strong ethical concerns. Like, you need to be really mindful and considered when you're hiring a virtual assistant from the Philippines that you're not exploiting someone, because I feel like that is so easily done. But I knew and had built a relationship with Michelle, and I could see how she runs her agency. Michelle is Australian but has Filipino heritage. And I have a podcast episode with her that I'll link in the show notes below. But I knew from the mastermind that all of her virtual assistants were paid so well for the cost of living in the Philippines. I knew that she was running their business and was available to me. Like, I wasn't communicating all the time with someone who was based overseas. I knew that they did regular training days, regular lunches, and personal development. And I also knew that there were stopgaps in the process. So there's a team leader. So if I have an issue, I can go to my team leader and I can go to Michelle to work out, what's the best way moving forward. So thought I would have a burl and hire my first ever Filipino virtual assistant, which was Febby. We went through the interview process and our personalities were really well aligned, as was Febby's skills. I think I was Febby's first ever client, and she's been with me ever since. So she's actually been the longest virtual assistant that I've ever had. She now knows my business like the back of her hand. And honestly, she's like the right-hand woman in my business. She's part of the family and part of the business. We initially started her at 10 hours per week, and over time that's increased to 20 hours per week. And it feels like every day I have someone who is able to back and forth with me in the business. Across a 5-day period, that's like 4 hours per day. If we looked at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's 5 hours per day that she's available to work for me in my business. It's awesome. And so as time's gone on, she knows my brand, her tasks have evolved, and her role has evolved. I think it's actually radically different to what it was when she started. And it's just really been dependent on my workload, my programs, and also the things that have sort of come out in the wash as things she's really great at. So we started in the business, and, I think one of the tasks she started doing was managing my email inbox. That's now a task that I've taken back in the business. So as I mentioned, we had Kate. Kate was primarily involved in managing my email inbox, but I've sort of taken that back. If you download my 16-hour CEO guide, there's an email in that nurture sequence that speaks to email list management and also has this checklist that you can get from me where I speak to when we want to be efficient in our businesses. Everybody is like, oh yeah, I just need to hire a new staff member. But actually, before you delegate a task, it's really important to first ask yourself, is this a task that's even actually required? Like, are we just doing busy work here? Can we just not do this in the process? And then the second part of that is having a look at, is this a task that can be automated? So to walk you through emails as an example, number one, is this something that I can just unsubscribe from? Am I just signing up willy-nilly to people's email lists? And can I actually just go through and unsubscribe from all of these so I'm not even receiving the email in the first place? Second step is, and my accountant always has this as her rule, she's like, if you have to code this when you're reconciling your books more than once, create a rule so you don't have to do it a second time. On the first time you do it, create it as a rule. Same for emails. You could automatically file invoices from a particular supplier. Let's say you have ManyChat and the invoice comes through once a month. It's automatically paid, so there's no action from you. You could literally take that email the first time you receive it, right click and create a rule that that invoice is always filed in business receipts. Done. Before having to outsource that to a virtual assistant. So I've really gone back, when I'm looking at creating peace and profit in my business, to that eliminate, automate, delegate in that order flow. So stepping back, she used to do a lot of emails, but I think there was 1 or 2 occasions when I was like, I need to design this webinar. Can you do it? And I've never seen anyone ever design slides in Canva as quickly as my virtual assistant. She's freaking ninja, and she has a really good eye for design. So that's a task that Febby has with time taken on more and more and more of in the business. So Febby at the moment is the only other person I have in the business on a consistent basis, and she's a contractor, not a staff member. So I will from time to time call in copywriters and other professionals too. But right now, Febby is the right-hand man in my business. She's the person I budget for. So in my business, the budget for virtual assistants is approximately 10% of my annual revenue. That percentage shifts and change. I have in my business like different revenue amounts, and the percentage shifts and changes depending on the revenue amount that I have in the business. So really treating my business as a CEO. And these are the roles that we do in the business. So I see myself in the business as having 2 main roles. Role number 1 is building relationships, and role number 2 is supporting clients. So in real terms, this is what that looks like. So building relationships is content creation, recording this podcast, managing Instagram and Threads, planning out my launches and preparing the content for things like webinars, conducting discovery calls with people who would like to join the mastermind or look at one-to-one coaching with me, and having conversations in the DMs with potential clients, answering people's questions, etc., as well as managing our ads. I'm here to cultivate that relationship, and front-facing content creation is a big part of my role. Then the second part of my role is supporting clients. If you look at the 16-hour CEO guide, you'll see exactly what that entails and the time that I invest into supporting my clients, which is a fair amount. So it looks like coaching and strategy through our Slack channel and our client calls, developing and updating training materials, writing the monthly magazine for Peace and Profit. And I do a lot of auditing my clients' work. So my clients have the ability to submit nurture sequences, sales pages, webinars, Instagram profiles, podcasts, the whole shebang to me. And I'll go through and either write out an audit with recommendations or record a video walkthrough of what we can do and improve to help increase whatever the goal is, conversions or whatever. And that is a large part of my role, is auditing their work. If you're in a high level container and you are not having your work audited, I almost feel like you're getting 50% of the service, because how can someone coach you on launching, for example, without you receiving those audits? And that's for high level containers. If you join an online course or something like that, of course, you wouldn't have that feedback and auditing. But if you join a mastermind or a one-to-one coaching experience and you're paying that premium champagne investment, you want champagne service. And so I spend a lot of my time auditing the work of our clients, because it's so important. Like, I can tell you what to do, but if I can also show you what to do and help you directly improve that, that's what's going to really provide you with a return on investment and the real skills and knowledge that you need. And then I have some CEO admin that I do in the business. So payroll and paying bills. I do now, as I said, my email management, missed payments and things like that, and then customer service emails.
we really don't get very many customer service emails at all. So that's something that I'm so happy to do. Phoebe's role is largely in supporting me with the execution and the nitty gritty of the things that need to be done. So, a lot of admin and a lot of editing. So, in terms of virtual assistants admin, every week she'll prepare reports. So, those are reports on how many leads have come through our system, what does my Instagram growth look like, what are the podcast statistics, what is like the budget versus actual. She'll prepare launch debrief figures. We have a warm leads tracking system. And so new leads, for example, will get added into the tagging on Kartra. She'll put that into our spreadsheet and then do things like sending gifts or prizes as directed to me by people who are in our programs. Then a large part of her role is editing. So we have our Peace and Profit magazine, and that goes out monthly to all of our mastermind members. So she'll go through and get that ready for me. She'll design that, she'll change the dates, she'll add the specific recordings from the last month in there, and then she'll assign that back to me to write the intro and write some of the content. She edits and uploads this podcast. So I will write the show notes for this podcast. We have a template that we use. She'll then go through and do all the rest. So she will edit the podcast, she'll upload it to WordPress, she'll create the feature image in WordPress, and she'll go through and create the audiogram. She'll also schedule the emails. So every week she will schedule a draft newsletter email, as well as we in the mastermind, we send a weekly like what's on email to everyone with just event reminders, etc. She'll go through and schedule those and draft them in the system. So I can just go through into Kartra and check it, write a few little bits and pieces, and then hit send. She'll also schedule launch emails, for example, as I need them. She'll design graphics. She designs a lot of graphics for us. As I said before, she's ninja at it. So why wouldn't I get her to do that? And so she'll do that as well as some tech. So a lot of what we are trying to do at the moment in the mastermind, like if the goal is to create multiple six figures in part-time hours, one of the best ways that we can do that is by giving you the actual tools to make that happen. So let me give you an example. We just held last week a training for Black Friday on how to run a flash sale type event for Black Friday. As part of that, we've given you, or the people in the mastermind, the spreadsheet of how to calculate the revenue. And obviously in the training, we gave the strategy behind that. But one of the other things we can do to support that is give you the link to be able to create the Canva graphics with a template, as well as the link to just click and deploy the sales page template based on the strategy for both Thrive Themes and Kartra. Or you can just take that layout and recreate that in whatever your software is, whether you're using Squarespace or Elementor or whatever that is, actually give you the how-to, actually give you the emails so that all you're doing is clicking and deploying and then executing on that. So a lot of what she'll do is supporting me with, like for me in my business, she'll create the new products for me and then I can go through and edit that, or she'll create the tech of the webinar, then I'll go through and edit it. And then she'll design resources such as template sales pages, template webinar slides, and other resources for our mastermind members. And that's when I'll go in after and I'll direct her. I'll say, this is what we're looking at. And then she'll go and create that so that then I'm just going through and editing it. And then from time to time, we'll have other projects in the business and we'll typically jointly manage that. So we'll have a catch up and say, well, okay, what are we going to do? This is the game plan. Who's going to do what bit? And we'll delegate back and forth in our project management system. So I'll speak to that in a moment as well. So one of the reasons Febby and I work generally well together is we're both generally on the same page in terms of communications. We don't want to have meetings for the sake of having meetings, and we're each so happy to talk to each other via Slack or if we need WhatsApp. It also helps that we're on the same time zone. So that's been probably another game changer for having Febby. And so the way that we communicate is each Tuesday at 10 a.m., we'll have a check-in meeting on Zoom. Tuesdays are my first real day back in the office after the weekend. So in the 16-hour CEO guide, that's where I give you my exact schedule. So you can see exactly what I do on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc. On Monday, both of us are generally doing those admin type CEO tasks. So I'll run payroll for myself and our other business. And I'll also review what needs to be done for the week. What are the priorities? What has to be completed this week? What are the events that we've got? Febby will also go through and she'll do that weekly reporting that she does, so that when we catch up on Tuesday, that's an opportunity to have a look at those reports, see where the gaps are or what we need to fix and edit. So when we have our Tuesday morning catch up, it's generally only 15 to 20 minutes long. We'll look at the priorities. I'll generally, as we're on the call, go through Asana and have a look at, well, what was due last week or what's coming up this week? What am I missing? Where are we dropping the ball? Where do we need to speak about something more? If there's been any changes to the original plans of something, that's where we'll go through and we'll just kind of edit it and set the game plan in real time. That's when I'll also speak to Febby's workload. How are you going? Have you got too much on, not enough on? We'll speak to tasks that have gone by the wayside. And then another thing that we do is almost like leave planning. So because I've got school kids, every couple of weeks we're on school vacation. So planning for what needs to happen then. If there's a podcast, how many podcast episodes need to be batched for the school vacation? What is that going to look like? We need projects for Febby to work on whilst I'm on school vacation? So generally just planning for what's coming up. What are the launches that are coming up? How are we going to work that? And she's got the opportunity there in real time to be like, hey, I really didn't understand that task. Or, by the way, I've asked you in Slack for this and you haven't got back to me. This is the opportunity for us to have that conversation. And, instead of just sitting back and forth behind a computer being like, hey, how's that going? We can say, do we need to speak about this? What's going on? Then through the days, like every day, we go back and forth multiple times per day, primarily on our Slack channel. So we have two channels that we use. One is the daily check-in channel. So we have a channel where we do daily check-ins with each other. So each of us will post pretty much every day. This is my check-in. This is the bullet points of what I'm working on and what I'm prioritizing. So I'll do it and she'll do it. And this is sort of a habit. Habit's a bad word, but this is something that came from the agency. They're required to send a daily check-in. So we each do that. So we'll each create a daily check-in and then reply with the bullet points of what we're waiting for, what we're working on, what needs to happen. And then we have a team projects channel. So for example, we've got a playlist project that we're working on at the moment. We then have a projects channel, and that's where we'll go in and create a task in the projects channel. And then we can just chat back and forth on the channel. We do all of our task management in Asana, but what I've found is that Asana was too confusing for the day-to-day back and forth of the tasks. Like, it's too hard to see where the communications are in Asana. It's hard for me to explain, but things were getting lost, whereas they don't get lost in the Slack channel. And so that's sort of how we work things. So in Asana is where we'll manage the majority of the tasks or the big level things that are due and need to happen. So we have one big overarching team projects 2024 board, and then that's split up into, like, we have a general area, or like, what do you call it, like boards for general links, like our reporting links, etc., upcoming leave dates, just important notices and links. Then most of the rest of the board is divided into months: January, February, March, April, May. So right now, as of the time of recording this, we're in October. So we have a board in October, and that lists out all of the tasks that we have for the month. And then we have a board that's called completed. So when we've ticked off a task from October, then we drag it across into completed so we can only see what are the things that are due. So a few things that I always do, we always assign to a person and we always put a due date on a project, because if you then go through and like look at the view of just the things that you have to do in list view, you won't see things that don't have a due date. And what we'll do is, so to give you an example of the podcast, we have the podcast episode that's assigned to me because obviously I need to plan and record the podcast. When I've done my part, I'll change the assignment from me to Febby. So then she can see that that's now due. And then if I need to change the due date on that, I will change the due date to when Febby needs to have that done. So that's how we sort of assign back and forth. When she's finished editing the podcast and uploading it, she'll send me the transcript and assign back to me, and I'll choose which part of the transcript I want to use for the audiogram. I'll assign back to her, and then she'll go and create and send me the audiogram. That sounds like a lot of work. It's actually not. Like, it's literally just a click of the button. Basically, you're clicking done my part back to you. And that's sort of how we manage through Asana. But we don't do the back and forth communication in Asana because it gets lost in just the way that it's laid out. So that's the way that I manage my team. You will also know, if you listen to this podcast, and I highly, highly recommend that you subscribe to this podcast, because this is all the kind of stuff that I'll be going into big depth on. I also speak regularly to the other team members that I have in my business, who I speak about regularly as working 24/7 for me. And that is my tools and my technology. I'm very intentional with the tools and technology I use in my business, and especially from a peace and profit perspective. So example, Kartra is one of the softwares that I use. If you listen to last week's episode, I speak more to how Kartra creates peace in my business. But also, for example, Facebook and Instagram ads, they work 24/7, constantly optimizing, having the conversations like sign up for my thing that I find awkward. So I count them a little bit as my team members as well. If you would like to know more about the tools and technology I use in my business, click on the show notes below and I will include that. I feel like I have gone into such depth in this episode, but you may still have questions about how I manage my team and what that looks like. Feel free to come and find me on Instagram, reach out at Robin Birkin. I'm such an open book. So if you have any other questions about how I manage my team, what we do, the task breakdowns, come and say hi at Robin Birkin, slide into my DMs, and I would be so happy to support and help you from there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I will catch you soon. Bye. Another episode on the books. If you'd like to continue the conversation and get more super savable tips, come and find me on Instagram at Robin Birkin. Otherwise, make sure you're subscribed, and I can't wait to see you next week.